happens when ancient biblical stories are used to justify modern conflicts? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has drawn widespread attention and criticism for invoking the biblical figure of Amalek in relation to Hamas and the Gaza Strip. This troubling comparison taps into a deeply rooted religious narrative, linking the modern-day enemy of Israel with a biblical archetype of evil. As the Gaza-Israel conflict continues to escalate, Netanyahu's use of biblical rhetoric has sparked questions about the ethics of blending religion and politics in such a charged way. Is this a strategic move or a dangerous manipulation of religious texts? Let's dive into the origins of the Amalek story, the symbolism behind Netanyahu's analogy, and the potential consequences of framing the Gaza conflict in these biblical terms. In the Old Testament, Amalek and the Amalekites are depicted as a fierce and brutal enemy of the Israelites. First appearing in the book of Exodus, Amalek led an unprovoked attack on the Israelites soon after their exodus from Egypt, which resulted in a fierce battle. God commands Moses to remember the hostility of Amalek and calls for the eventual obliteration of their memory. The Amalekites were not merely an enemy in battle, but came to symbolize enduring evil in Jewish theology. Their legacy is tied to the perpetual enmity toward Israel, with several texts portraying Amalek as the embodiment of those who oppose the divine plan for the Jewish people. This biblical narrative has resonated through Jewish history, where Amalek is seen not just as a tribe or nation, but as a representation of existential threats to the Jewish community. Rabbinical scholars have often used the story to discuss themes of survival and divine justice. The enduring power of Amalek's symbolism makes it a potent, if controversial, narrative in modern Jewish and Israeli political thought. Netanyahu's invocation of Amalek is not simply a passing reference. It's a deliberate and powerful metaphor that resonates with religious communities and those familiar with the biblical text. In several speeches and statements, Netanyahu has alluded to Gaza and Hamas as modern-day Amalekites. By doing so, he frames the conflict in religious terms, casting Israel's military actions as a moral and even divine mission to defend the Jewish people against evil. This rhetoric elevates the Gaza conflict from a political struggle to a cosmic battle between good and evil. From a strategic standpoint, invoking Amalek serves several purposes for Netanyahu. It solidifies his base of support among religious Zionists and other groups who interpret the conflict through a biblical lens. Additionally, it allows him to justify harsh military actions as morally righteous, aligning them with divine will. However, this use of religious symbolism also carries risks as it dehumanizes the enemy and portrays them as irredeemable, fueling a cycle of violence. Netanyahu's use of the Amalek narrative raises significant ethical questions. While it may galvanize support from religious constituencies, it also blurs the line between political conflict and religious war. In modern geopolitics, where religion can already be a divisive factor, the invocation of such potent biblical symbols risks escalating the conflict into something more existential, where compromise and negotiation seem impossible. The Amalek narrative, in particular, suggests not only enmity but the total annihilation of the enemy, a dangerous precedent when applied to modern warfare. Critics argue that this kind of rhetoric dehumanizes Palestinians, portraying them as an eternal foe rather than as political adversaries with legitimate grievances. When leaders frame conflicts in these terms, they often justify extreme actions, including civilian casualties, under the guise of divine sanction. Many historians, theologians, and international observers have expressed concern that such rhetoric could deepen divisions, making peace an even more distant prospect. The use of biblical narratives in modern conflict needs careful ethical consideration, lest it lead to further cycles of violence and hatred. Netanyahu's comparison of Gaza or Hamas to Amalek has provoked a range of reactions within Israel and abroad. Among Israel's religious communities, particularly those aligned with religious Zionism, the analogy has found some support, as it reinforces a historical and theological narrative that frames Israel's enemies as existential threats. However, many secular Israelis and political opponents have expressed discomfort with the use of religious symbols in political discourse, fearing it could lead to unnecessary escalation and undermine diplomatic efforts. Palestinians, on the other hand, have reacted with outrage, being likened to Amalek, an archetype of evil destined for destruction. Further fuels their perception of being dehumanized and delegitimized in the eyes of the Israeli government. This intensifies their resentment and entrenches the cycle of violence. On the international stage, world leaders and human rights organizations have voiced concern about the dangers of religiously charged rhetoric in such a volatile region. The use of Amalek as a metaphor risks alienating allies and complicating peace efforts. Netanyahu's comparison of Hamas and Gaza to Amalek has significant implications for the ongoing conflict. By framing the struggle as one of biblical proportions, Netanyahu effectively closes the door on peaceful negotiation or reconciliation. If the enemy is perceived as a modern-day Amalek, there can be no compromise, only total victory or annihilation. This type of rhetoric may embolden hardline factions within Israel, leading to more aggressive military strategies and reducing the likelihood of diplomacy. Moreover, when political leaders use such charged religious language, it affects public perception. Many Israelis may begin to see the conflict in stark black and white terms, making it harder to build support for peaceful solutions. Similarly, Palestinians may feel increasingly marginalized and vilified, which can push them toward more extreme measures of resistance. In the long run, using the Amalek metaphor risks deepening the divide between the two sides and making the prospect of a peaceful resolution even more distant. Relying on religious allegories like Amalek to address modern conflicts is both dangerous and counterproductive. Modern-day geopolitics requires secular diplomacy grounded in pragmatism, not ancient religious narratives that can inflame tensions. Rather than invoking biblical enemies, leaders should focus on practical solutions that address the root causes of the conflict, such as territorial disputes, security concerns, and humanitarian issues. Promoting dialogue, fostering understanding, and working toward coexistence are essential for any sustainable peace. Religious rhetoric may rally a certain base, but it often alienates the other side and hardens positions. Leaders on both sides need to move beyond religious justifications for conflict and focus on policies that build bridges rather than burn them. Encouraging voices of moderation within Israeli and Palestinian communities who seek compromise and peace is crucial for de-escalating tensions and moving toward a lasting solution. In conclusion, the use of biblical analogies, particularly the Amalek narrative, in modern conflicts like the Gaza-Israel situation, carries significant risks. While it may serve a political purpose for Netanyahu by solidifying support among certain religious factions, it also deepens the divide between Israelis and Palestinians and complicates the path to peace. Religious rhetoric, when used in geopolitical contexts, has the potential to inflame tensions and make conflicts seem more intractable than they truly are. Leaders must be cautious when invoking ancient religious symbols in today's complex political landscape. The stakes are too high to allow religious allegories to dictate modern warfare. To build a future of peace, it is essential to focus on dialogue, understanding, and diplomacy rather than divisive narratives. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Tales for more engaging content. Hit the bell icon to stay updated.